Hi, welcome to Heal with Holly. I'm Holly.
And I'm Joe.
We have a very special guest on our show to tell you about a product that could be potentially life-changing for you.
Right now, especially during this time, a lot of people are under stress. And Dr. Platt knows quite a bit about stress.
As a matter of fact, he wrote a book that we love called Adrenaline Dominance. And adrenaline dominance is something that you don't really hear about. And personally, I think you should.
Definitely.
Because there are a lot of conditions that are driven by having really high cortisol levels and having too much adrenaline, which is basically a really unhealthy stress response. And we know that people are getting more and more stress, and they're starting to show the wear and tear, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So Dr. Platt's here today to talk to you about the real details of adrenaline dominance, cortisol, and give you solutions. He has this beautiful solution. I tried it myself and I loved it, and I couldn't shut up about it. So I'm really excited that Dr. Platt's here to share it with you because it's such an easy fix.
Talk about adrenaline. You know, adrenaline is a hormone, and it's also a neurotransmitter. And what's interesting is that people think of it as the fight or flight hormone. And that's true. When people are in danger, the body pours out adrenaline. But what's interesting is that that's a very, very small function of adrenaline. The primary function of adrenaline is to ensure that the brain has enough fuel. Most people do not realize that the brain uses more sugar than any other part of the body. And anytime the body detects that the brain is running out of fuel or glucose, it just pours out, adrenaline to raise glucose levels by a process called gluconeogenesis. You don't have to know that, but and it's where the body converts protein into glucose. This is something that can happen all day and all night. In fact, it's the number one reason why people have trouble sleeping. Is because of excess adrenaline. Some people toss and turn, some people grind their teeth at night, some people clench their jaw, some people get up at night to urinate, some people have what's called restless leg syndrome. These are all problems related to excess adrenaline. And then during the day, again, the body is still continuing to put out adrenaline unless people are providing fuel to the brain. And this is where conditions like ADHD comes from. And here we're talking about millions and millions of people with ADHD. And what's interesting, the book that you just showed is the only book that ever mentions that ADHD is related to adrenaline, which is kind of surprising because there are thousands of books on ADHD. And in the book, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the only condition I put in the good section is ADHD, which might surprise some people because, it's mostly thought of as a learning disorder. The interesting thing about ADHD, it's not a learning disorder, it's an interest disorder. And the most intelligent, successful, creative people in the world have ADHD. I'm sure I'm talking to two people now that have ADHD.
I loved what you had to say in the book about that condition. And I would really encourage people to read that because everything that you said was so spot on, and it was really framed up in a way that I think people can appreciate.
Your research is really, really groundbreaking. So tell us more about how this stuff is groundbreaking.
It's basically way below the radar of the whole medical system. Nobody ever talks about adrenaline, and yet it's the underlying cause of many conditions that are actually felt to be incurable. And so I guess my work would be considered groundbreaking because I'm the only one that's ever talked about it. This is the only book that's ever been written that talks about the clinical consequences of too much adrenaline. And the tragedy is that it's a very easy problem to deal with and to correct. If you don't mind my venting a little bit about the medical system, what's interesting that people don't realize that doctors get very little training about hormones, even though hormones control every system in the body. And doctors get no training, basically, in terms of the causation of illness. What they are trained to do is that if you have a problem, you take a drug for it. So right now we're at the point that prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death, which doesn't speak well for the whole medical system, if you ask me. But, so even when it comes to adrenaline, you have to treat the reason why the body is releasing it, and we will get to that. So stay tuned. The whole thing about excess adrenaline, for example, there's a condition called fibromyalgia. And there are about 10 million people that have been diagnosed with this condition. And what's interesting, they've basically all been told that there's no cure for it. And part of the reason is doctors don't even know what causes it. And they don't even know what the pain is due to. And, but just for your listeners, say, pain and fibromyalgia is due to the buildup of lactic acid in the muscle tissue. It's the same pain that athletes get after they work out. They get what they call a muscle burn, but that's lactic acid. Difference is that athletes relax after they work out. And as they relax, the circulation goes right through the muscles and clears out the acid. People with fibromyalgia don't relax. They're pouring out adrenaline. They keep the muscle tense 24 hours a day. And these muscles compress the venules, little veins, and the lymphatic circulation. So they can't drain out the acid, it just sits there. So it's a very simple matter, just reducing adrenaline, relaxing the muscles, and improving the circulation. So it only takes anywhere from 3 days, 3 weeks to get rid of fibromyalgia. But people are concerned sometimes with anger, road rage. Road rage is all about adrenaline. And they have all these anger management classes that people go to, which complete waste of time because they don't deal with why people get angry. And that's adrenaline. And you could actually get rid of road rage in 24 hours. That's all it takes to get rid of road rage. Then another thing about adrenaline, people that get involved with drugs and alcohol. But nobody talks about the reason why people get involved in drugs and alcohol. But, most people that are involved with drugs and alcohol, they get involved because they just want to relax. And, so again, just lowering adrenaline, people don't have, it doesn't get rid of the habit, but gets rid of the need to drink or to use drugs.
Right. So you're fixing the problem so that the cravings naturally go down.
They actually had a better treatment for alcoholism and people that were involved with cocaine or heroin or whatever, and that was fen-phen. Fen-phen took away cravings for everything. No matter what the craving was for, it less than 24 hours, it was gone. And they took it off the market. It was taken off the market by the FDA based on a study that involved 24 women who were taking 18 times the normal dose of the drugs. Fen-phen, by the way, is phentermine and fenfluramine. They were two generic drugs. And drug companies couldn't compete with fen-phen because not only was it good for weight loss, it was nothing better for high blood pressure and migraine headaches, and it covered a lot of different conditions, but it was wonderful for people that had addiction. And it's a shame they just didn't leave it on the market for people that were addicted. But
so just to say a little bit more about the medical system, you actually surrendered your medical license.
I was forced to surrender it. Doctors in my town had a problem with me. and the reason is because I deal with the underlying cause of illness, when their patients came to my office to see me, I took them off all their medications. Because when you treat the cause of an illness, they don't need drugs. But that's a real slap in the face to doctors because that's all they know is drugs. So they reported me to the medical board in California. But the medical board couldn't investigate me because they had no patient complaints. So what they did, they sent in undercover patients to provide complaints so they could investigate me. But in all the time, the 5 years that they, put me under a microscope, they never found a patient that had any complaints. I'd never harmed a patient. And yet I was forced to surrender my license because I refused to stop taking people off drugs. Now, you would think, well, why would the medical board be concerned about this? Well, the medical boards are funded by drug companies. Drug companies control everything when it comes to medicine. The FDA, the medical boards, they control the medical schools, everything. So that's why I had to surrender my license.
That's one of the things, that I end up in a lot of conversations with is with people who think that you know, I'm not reading the science or I'm not listening to the professionals. And I'm always telling them, like, you have to look at the doctors who are no longer part of the system, and you have to understand why they were kicked out of the system.
Well, it's like they've had cures for cancer that we'll never hear about. You know, we have our whole medical system thrives on disease and illness. It does not thrive on wellness. And that's why there's no preventive medicine in this country. They won't allow it. And people don't realize that. They think we actually have a good medical system, even though we're on the bottom of the list of healthcare of all civilized countries with the highest incidence of everything: strokes, heart attacks, cancer, obesity, diabetes, you name it, we've got it. Even infant mortality, we're number one on the list.
Yeah. And we also have people spending more per capita for their healthcare. What are some of the conditions for the people that are watching this? What are some of the conditions that are caused by excess adrenaline, so that if you mention it and they have that condition, they can really start to look at this product that we're going to talk about that's so beautiful, and they can start to look at the solution?
Well, you know, it starts at, you know, excess adrenaline starts at a very young age. You know, you may have heard of babies that have colic. Colic is all about adrenaline. And these are the babies that, when they're in the womb, are the ones that do all that kicking because they have a lot of adrenaline. And the product that you're going to be mentioning actually gets rid of colic in babies within 3 minutes. It's gone.
That's fantastic.
Well, you just rub it on the belly. You can even rub it on the bottom of their feet and it goes away.
I know some mothers who are going to be sending you a thank you note when they see this video.
Well, it gets better for the mother. You know, the terrible twos, by the way, is also adrenaline. But let's go a little bit further. You know, there are some children that have problems with bedwetting, and that could last for years. But bedwetting is also caused by excess adrenaline, and you can get rid of that in 24 hours. I should mention that you only see bedwetting in creative type children. You know, children that are drawn to music or dancing or drawing or whatever, would like to build things. And the reason for that is that creative people have the most adrenaline. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. And then as people get older, then ADHD pops up. And again, you know, I mentioned that's adrenaline. And but other conditions, you know, I mentioned fibromyalgia, but irritable bowel syndrome is caused by excess adrenaline, because adrenaline cuts off blood supply to the intestines because they're not needed for survival, and adrenaline is a survival hormone. That's why some people get cold hands and cold feet, which is also caused by adrenaline, but people always blame the thyroid, but it's adrenaline. The other conditions, you know, when people have a lot of adrenaline, they very commonly carry a lot of tension in the back of the neck. And what this can cause is tinnitus. It's probably the number one cause of tinnitus. And also, you may have heard of people that get headaches. And the number one cause of headache, you know, headaches always come from the neck, but there's a certain type of headache called occipital neuritis. And this is a headache that's always mistaken for migraines, always, because it causes excruciating headaches. Very often they shoot right into the back of the eye. And what's interesting, doctors know nothing about this headache, even though they're like 90% of what migraine headaches are actually occipital neuritis, which are so easy to get rid of. You know, within minutes you can get rid of these kind of headaches. The other conditions, there's a condition called PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's found in about 8% of women that are menstruating. And these are the women that for 10 days out of the month, nobody can live with them. And the reason for that, they have severe anger issues and severe mood swings. And again, this condition, they don't know what causes it. They don't know how to fix it. They always put these women on antidepressants that do nothing except help them gain weight. So, so again, PMDD is all about adrenaline. PTSD, which you might have heard of, is also all about adrenaline. And, you know, I'm probably leaving out a lot. There are many conditions related to excess adrenaline.
So what would be some of the other conditions that are connected to adrenaline? I know I was really surprised by some of the things that you mentioned in your book that I never would have thought would have this connection.
Well, people talk about anxiety, and anxiety is always caused by excess adrenaline. And then even depression There are basically two different types of depression. One is called a reactive depression. Somebody loses a job or somebody dies in the family or whatever. And so they're reacting to a traumatic event in their life. And, there's really not a whole lot you can do for those kind of depressions other than a tincture of time. But there's another type of depression called endogenous depression. And this is a depression that comes from within. And people are depressed, but they don't know why they're depressed. And the most common cause of this is internalization of anger. And the most common cause of anger is adrenaline. It's an anger hormone. And so, look at all these millions of people on antidepressants, which are very toxic type drugs. And then stress. Stress is always caused by excess adrenaline. And again, the problem with stress is that it causes the body to release cortisol. And cortisol is very damaging to the immune system. And right now is not a good time to have a damaged immune system. So again, this product that you're talking about, because it reduces stress, it also reduces cortisol. And so it benefits the immune system immensely. So,
cortisol can actually damage your brain. I know the Amen Clinic has SPECT scans showing what cortisol does actually to your brain.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
It's not pretty. And also, let's talk a little bit about how the body stores cortisol, because some of that extra weight that people have, this is the connection between stress and weight gain.
Well, it's interesting. People, know a lot about cortisol and weight gain, but what they don't talk about is what causes that rise in cortisol. And basically, the only thing that raises cortisol levels is adrenaline. And and what's interesting is that adrenaline peaks at 2:30 in the morning. When people are trying to sleep, and very often people wake up at that time to urinate. But the thing is that the reason why the body is releasing adrenaline at that time because the brain has run out of fuel. So the body releases adrenaline, which is raising sugar levels. And the thing about sugar is that it doesn't matter whether you're eating sugar or if the body is making sugar. If you don't burn it up, then the body takes all that extra sugar and stores it in your fat cells as fat. And then what makes it worse is that when the body releases adrenaline, it creates stress. Then the body responds to that by putting out cortisol to deal with the stress. And the first thing cortisol does, it raises sugar levels through a different process called glycogenolysis, where it converts glycogen into sugar. And so now, while people are sleeping or trying to sleep, they're producing two hormones that raise sugar levels, and they're not burning it up. And I am 100% convinced that the number one cause of weight gain in this country is adrenaline. And again, this is, when you hear about people that diet and exercise and yet they don't lose weight or they even continue to gain weight, that's because they're gaining weight while they're sleeping. And nobody talks about gaining weight while you're sleeping. Sometimes you get the feeling it's not a perfect world, so I don't know. But yes, cortisol and adrenaline are just,
So you mentioned the fibromyalgia and you mentioned ADHD. Does this apply to like MS or ADD?
Well, okay. Well, ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, these are kids that are hyperactive. ADD, these are kids that have trouble focusing, just like kids with ADHD, but they're not hyperactive. So they call that ADD. But I call people with ADD, as having a creative type ADHD, because these are the creative people that have ADD. And basically, they almost always have a weight problem. And the reason for that, these are people that are putting out a lot of adrenaline, which keeps on raising sugar levels, but they're not hyperactive like kids with ADHD who burn up their sugar. These people don't burn up their sugar, and as a result, they put on a lot of weight. One more step, then you have people that have both types of ADHD. They have ADHD and ADD, or creative type ADHD. This is what I call a mixed type ADHD. And these are the most successful people in the world. These are the heads of every major corporation. And probably not one of these corporate heads ever finished college, by the way, and yet they're heads of corporations. You know, keep in mind that adrenaline is what keeps people intelligent and enhances their creativity. And so these people do a lot. And they don't have the patience to deal with school. They want to do things. You know, Bill Gates is a classic example. Steve Jobs, classic mixed type ADHD. Neither one of these people ever finished college, by the way. And they did okay.
So since we're talking about brain function and sugar, if someone was diabetic and they're going, okay, well, my issue has to do with blood sugar levels, how would those two issues correlate?
Well, there is a connection. You know, you may have heard of people that are labeled as pre-diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a blood test called the hemoglobin A1C. And what it is, it's a measure of glucose, sugar, inside red cells. And since they live for about 100 days, it gives like a picture of blood levels over the last 3 months. And when the hemoglobin A1C is elevated, they say that these people are pre-diabetic. But 99% of the time, these people just have a lot of adrenaline. Remember, adrenaline keeps on raising sugar levels. And I'm sure that there are a lot of diabetics that have a problem with too much adrenaline. You know, most diabetics, you know, their sugar is highest in the morning. But remember, you know, just prior to that, they're putting out adrenaline and cortisol to raise sugar levels. So it's not surprising that it's highest in the morning. So there is a connection. And, you know, most diabetics will actually improve with this thing that, you know, this cream that you want to talk about.
Right. So one of the things that Dr. Amen talks about in his brain health coaching program is a whole section on hormones. And the way he puts it is that, you know, hormones are what make us who we are. They're what make our personality and how we interact with the world. What would you say about, because we're about to talk more about hormones and that's what your product is all about. So can you just kind of educate people on hormones? Because a lot of people have ideas about what hormones are, but they don't really understand how powerful they are.
Well, hormones are basically messengers. And what they do, they attach to what are called receptocytes on different cells. And once they're attached to a receptocyte, then they release whatever chemical messenger they're trying to do. And it goes into the nucleus of the cell, and then the cell does whatever it's supposed to do. So hormones are, you know, they run the body. And like I mentioned, every system in the body is controlled by hormones. And I think, and it's interesting that doctors get very little training on hormones. And I hate to say this, especially gynecologists.
Right. And if hormones are off, you know, if your hormones are off, that's going to affect not only your brain function, you know, how your brain works, but what other kinds of things are your hormones being off going to affect?
Well, any function, GI function, sexual function. You know, as people get older, you know, their hormone levels go down. And, you know, look at all the people that are on cholesterol-lowering drugs. You know, what people have to realize that cholesterol, that hormones are made with cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so, you know, and what they have found is that people with the highest cholesterol levels have the greatest longevity. So I'm trying to figure out what's the reason for giving people drugs that lower cholesterol. Not only does it make them not live as long, but destroys to some extent their hormones. And, you know, so you wind up with side effects like irreversible kidney failure and permanent nerve damage and heart damage, and sudden death, you know, brain damage, memory loss. You know, and yet these are the number one selling drugs in the world. So what's wrong with this picture? I don't know.
So if somebody is taking these drugs and they start to use this amazing cream, what kind of support do they need from physicians?
first of all, I'm not allowed to tell people to get off drugs.
Right.
But well, to be honest with you, this cream doesn't really necessarily help people get off these drugs or replace these drugs. But I mean, the cream does an awful lot, but it doesn't really affect cholesterol to a large extent. I'm going to back up on that. People that have a lot of adrenaline, adrenaline is a stimulant. And again, remember, it's creating stress, and the body is releasing cortisol to deal with the stress. Well, cortisol is also an anti-thyroid hormone. And what it does, it causes T4, which is one of the thyroid hormones that the body produces, releasing cortisol to deal with the stress. Well, cortisol is also an anti-thyroid hormone. And what it does, it causes T4, which is one of the thyroid hormones that the body produces, it prevents it from converting into T3, which does 90% of the work of the thyroid. And then it takes T3 and causes it to become reverse T3, which has no activity. So so cortisol has a big effect, not only on weight gain, but also on lowering thyroid function, which also contributes to weight. So one of the nice things about this cream is that because it blocks adrenaline and it also enables people to get on thyroid, because when people have a lot of adrenaline, they don't tolerate thyroid because they're both stimulants. And very often you just have to wait to provide thyroid hormone until you get their adrenaline down. People, when they first start this cream, they may find that they are more tired, and that's because they've been living on adrenaline. And
Right.
that tiredness is because they're low in thyroid. So it's another hormone that you have to look at.
So we're going to say what this product is, but I just want to say my own little testimonial about when I experienced your cream. I had just moved from Tennessee down to Florida, and I was so tired. But in that move, there was a lot that had to be done. We closed on the house in 14 days in both locations. And I was just, let's go. I got to get. And then when I moved down here, I was still really kind of amped up, and I needed to relax, and I couldn't. And I wasn't sleeping the way that I wanted to. And then I found your book and I found your product. And literally within 24 hours of using your cream, I felt like the most amazing feeling. I felt like I could just, right? And then I slept. I was really nice. So my children, thank you. I felt so good. So let's talk about what's in your cream and why it works to make people feel so good so fast.
Well, what we're talking about is a hormone. It's bioidentical, which means it's identical to the hormone that the body produces, and it's natural, and it's progesterone cream. And most doctors and most people think that progesterone is a woman's hormone, and it certainly does. It is a woman's hormone, but men and women have the identical hormones. So it's not a woman's hormone. For men and women, it's an extremely safe hormone. I mentioned you could use it in babies that have colic. And basically it has no side effects, which is nice. And you can't overdose on it, which is also nice. And it's a cream, which means that it's applied transdermally, so it goes straight through the skin into the bloodstream. There are other ways that people provide progesterone. For example, there's oral, like pills, capsules, like permethrin. I never recommend oral progesterone because it goes straight to the liver, converts into a different hormone called allopregnanolone. And this is why they have women take it at night, because it causes people to be very sleepy. But it's not progesterone, so I don't recommend it. The cream that we have is a 5% cream. 5% means that each pump is 50 milligrams, and 50 milligrams is the exact strength you need to block adrenaline. So, and it's usually applied on the forearms, in their calves or their feet at night. They could just massage the cream wherever the cramp is. It'll go away in about 30 seconds. People that have what's called restless leg syndrome, which is sort of an uncomfortable feeling, massage it into the thighs, and that's gone in about 30 seconds. But basically speaking, it's the forearms and possibly the back of the neck. So if they have ringing in the ears, the back of the neck. If they have headaches, the back of the neck. But progesterone also is mostly known for blocking estrogen, which is actually, to me, a toxic hormone. And the reason why I say that is that estrogen is the cause of fibroids and endometriosis, and it causes polycystic ovaries, and it causes gallbladder disease and asthma and migraine headaches and phlebitis and lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And
certain types of cancer too, right? Aren't certain types of cancer estrogen dominant cancer?
Six different cancers in women, 2 in men. To me, it's a toxic hormone, but it's important because women can't get pregnant without it. And the primary function of estradiol, which is the strongest estrogen, is pregnancy. So you would say, well, why is it that when women go into the menopause and they're no longer childbearing, why do doctors give them estrogen? And I don't have an answer for that. There's another type of estrogen called estriol, which is the only estrogen that doesn't cause cancer, and the only one that's actually beneficial for vaginal dryness. And that's a safe estrogen, but very rarely used, but it's safe. But progesterone also is the hormone that controls insulin. A lot of people get sleepy between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, which is when insulin peaks. And I know for myself, and I know there must be other people that get very sleepy in cars. And I used to have to slap my face when I was driving, trying to keep my eyes open. It wasn't slapping my face. It just takes about 5 or 10 minutes for the body to produce adrenaline and raise sugar levels. But that's a long 5 or 10 minutes when you're trying not to go off the road. But once you're on progesterone, you'll never get sleepy in a car. And you won't get sleepy between 3 and 4 in the afternoon because it blocks insulin. And insulin is another hormone that, it speeds up the aging process. It raises blood pressure. It puts on fat. It's not a happy hormone, but we need it. We need it. But progesterone, because it blocks insulin and adrenaline and estrogen, it blocks the 3 most toxic hormones in the body. And remember, it's good for men, women, children. ADHD, you can get rid of ADHD in 24 hours, just by reducing adrenaline. But I have to say something.
And it does work on the bedwetting too. This progesterone cream is fantastic for kids that have a bedwetting issue.
It is. But I have to say something. As good as the cream is, very often when people have a lot of adrenaline, they have to, again, approach it from the reason why the body is releasing adrenaline. And again, keep in mind that the body is releasing adrenaline to raise sugar levels for the brain. Now, what this means is that if people provide the fuel to the brain, then the body doesn't have to use adrenaline to do it. So for conditions like bedwetting and ADHD and fibromyalgia, because these are conditions related to a lot of adrenaline, these people also have to be providing the right fuel to the brain. And, what makes it relatively simple is that, remember, there's only 2 reasons why the body puts out adrenaline. One is if people are in danger, but that's not a big reason. And the other reason is to provide fuel to the brain, sugar. But the brain uses 2 different fuels. One is glucose. Remember I said more glucose than any other part of the body. And the other fuel, which is just as important, if not more important, are ketones. And, people have heard of a ketogenic diet, which I don't recommend because it's a very hard diet to accomplish. But you can get ketones from coconut oil or MCT oil. Right. And so if people add that into the meal plan and use vegetables for the glucose, and use the progesterone cream, they'll do exceptionally well.
So I had a friend who just ordered your cream. She's a little edgy. Okay. I love her. I love her edge. She's from New York. And, but she's been particularly edgy lately. And she said, you know, she's just miserable. And she and her husband had said that they were going to have another child. And I said, well, what about that? And she said, oh no, I'm perimenopausal. There's no way. And I suggested that she order your cream. She has MS. I got the call about maybe an hour, 30 minutes after she did your cream.
Right.
And was she not ecstatic?
She was super ecstatic.
The tingling in her hands, she said, the tingling in my hands is gone. And then, so she did another application, and she called me that night, and she was just laughing, saying, I'm so nice. I just feel nice. So let's talk about all the sweet thing about progesterone, because it really does have a softening effect on people.
You know, in all the years that I've been using progesterone cream with people, I've only had one male patient complain about using the progesterone. His complaint was it made him too compassionate.
Right.
Well, this was a very angry fellow, and he was used to his anger. He liked his anger, and so he felt uncomfortable about being nice all of a sudden. His wife liked it.
Right.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned about, you know, pregnant women. Have you ever heard of women that vomit throughout their entire pregnancy?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, they call that hyperemesis gravidarum anyway. And again, it's another condition that doctors don't know what causes it, but we do. It's excess adrenaline. And
Wow.
and it's a very easy type of problem to diminish just by reducing adrenaline levels. There's another condition called cyclical vomiting syndrome. And these are people that once they start vomiting, they can't stop and very often have to be hospitalized. Again, also caused by excess adrenaline. You know, unfortunately, there's probably a lot of conditions caused by excess adrenaline that, you know, I had a fellow that came into my office. He was about 47 at the time, and his major complaint was that he said every morning he would wake up and vomit. And the only thing that would cause that is, again, excess adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So, and he also had severe fibromyalgia. I mean, severe. And so, you know, so I put some cream on his arm and he rubbed them together. And then we went back to talking. And about 5 minutes after I put the cream on, he sat back in his chair and he looked at me and he said, Doc, in my entire life, I've never felt this good. You know, and let me tell you something. It's very rewarding, you know, to get people to feel better. It really is. And doctors don't see it very often because they're just giving out Band-Aids. But you know, it's not hard to get people well if you treat the reason why they're not well. Am I asking Go ahead.
When you talked about the estrogen and with men's issues, like there's a little blue pill that gets advertised quite a bit. So is the progesterone going to help men improve their sexual function?
Well, maybe indirectly, and not directly, but maybe indirectly. The reason I say that is sometimes men have trouble with performance when they have a lot of anger. And just by reducing anger, that can improve. Women, by the way, need progesterone for libido. They can't have a libido without progesterone. But men, they just need testosterone or a little blue pill.
So when I discovered your progesterone cream, I had actually listened to you on Bulletproof Radio with Dave Asprey, who I love. I'm a big fan. And I got really excited listening to your interview, and I ordered the cream, and I decided to do an experiment on myself with your progesterone cream. And I had my own little way of doing it. I'm not really sure if I was doing it according to anybody's instructions, but it was my experiment on myself.
Okay.
And I did it with my kids so that we could just see, you know, how much is this really going to change us, right? Like, how, you know, what this is a hormone and we have our own ideas about life and we have stress and our bodies are where they are. And everyone in the house experienced a profound shift in 24 hours. Now, I do not recommend anyone do anything with a product that I do, but we kind of took a bath in it. I got kind of happy. I did more than one pump, and I put it everywhere. I mean, I put it here and behind my knees and on my belly, behind my neck, all the places that you said to put it. I put it everywhere at the same time. But it was incredible. And like your patient that said, I've never felt this good in my life. I couldn't believe, I mean, all the ways that I was feeling so much better. It was like I could breathe. I mean, like everything just goes, and you can think, and life feels good. So let's talk about how you recommend people actually take your progesterone cream according to your instructions.
Yeah,
And
well,
there's something to do with eating too, right? There's a time that people are supposed to take it, and you can explain that too.
the usually when people have excess adrenaline, and for those people that are wondering, well, do I have excess adrenaline? Usually people with a lot of adrenaline, they have trouble sleeping, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, and might grind their teeth. They'll carry tension in the back of the neck. They'll have cold hands and cold feet. They may have palpitations, maybe some anger issues. So, so that's sort of like warning signals that people have extra adrenaline. Usually what I recommend if people do have extra adrenaline, they start out with 4 times a day, and which would be before each meal, about 1 to 3 minutes before breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And also, remember, the brain runs out of fuel at night, and I know that people are told you should never eat after 5 p.m., but I recommend that people, eat something before they go to sleep. Usually something like leftover vegetables, which are a good source of glucose for the brain. And the reason why using the cream before eating is that as soon as people put food in their mouth, they're putting out insulin. And the problem with insulin is that when insulin goes up, blood sugar drops. And when blood sugar drops, the body puts out more adrenaline to raise your sugar level back up again. So one of the ways of controlling adrenaline is to control insulin. Now, they don't have to be eating something. They can use progesterone anytime. And I should mention, I don't recommend putting it on the abdomen. You don't want to put it over fatty tissue because it'll actually create fat.
That is good to know, because see, I had this idea.
Okay.
You want to hear about my idea? I had this idea that if I rubbed it on my abdomen, it was going to suck the cortisol out.
Well, the idea was good.
But that's not what you want to do, guys. So this is why we're interviewing Dr. Platt, so he can tell you how to really use it the right way.
Yeah, so usually, one pump is put on a form, you rub the 2 forms together, and for those people that have tension in the back of the neck, they could either put it on the back of the neck and upper shoulders, or do half and half there and half on the arms. And you don't have to rotate sites, a lot of progesterone, because it's not going to use up the receptor sites. But what I do recommend is that every so often you take a loofah sponge or some kind of exfoliating sponge and scrub your arms just to get it out of the pores. But other than that, so I don't, the other thing, I don't recommend cycling it. In other words, I have women use it every day because they're producing insulin and adrenaline every day. And the other thing about feeling good, progesterone is a natural antidepressant. That's why, a lot of women that are pregnant feel good when they're pregnant. People with MS, by the way, feel a lot better when they're pregnant. And,
she and I talked about that, because I said, MS and she was like, oh my gosh, so that was a really cool connection that she kind of made on her own. So
yeah, and the other nice thing about progesterone, again, it's the strongest stimulus to the production of myelin, and MS is a demyelinating condition. So anything that improves myelin is going to improve MS. So that's probably why her tingling went away so quick.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you didn't mention, or that you didn't recommend the cycling. So this is a product that people would want to get and take every single day, or this is a product that people would get and take for 90 days and then they'd be good to go? Or how do you recommend the long-term usage of the product?
Well, People that produce adrenaline are always going to produce adrenaline. That's not going to get in. The only way you can actually lower adrenaline completely is to remove the adrenal glands. So I tell people that even as they're being lowered into the ground, have them send some progesterone with them. So, which is another way of saying it's long-term treatment.
So for people who, I know when somebody was born and their mom had a stressful pregnancy, right? So they're growing in that high stress environment. Would these be people that would absolutely need to take progesterone like for life? Like, does that change you so that you're more of a high adrenaline human?
Are you saying something that happens in the womb that to the point that they start putting out adrenaline? And
I just know that people who were, and Dr. Amen talks about this too, if someone had a really stressful pregnancy and that fetus was developing, right, with higher adrenaline and cortisol levels, they can actually be born with a brain that fires a little more or a little differently. And he talks about, you know, addressing that, like recognizing what your mother's pregnancy was like is going to affect you. And there's ways to give your body what it needs to help you have more balance.
Well, there are a lot of different types of stressful pregnancies. And a lot of them are actually caused by excess adrenaline, by the way, you know, like gestational diabetes and eclampsia. But but remember I mentioned that, you know, those fetus, they do a lot of kicking. That's adrenaline. And maybe that is in response to, well, the adrenaline would be in response to the mother's release of adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So, and yeah, but once somebody is born with excess adrenaline, it's going to be with them.
Right.
So is the product safe for pregnant women?
It's exceedingly safe for pregnant women. In fact, you know, remember, women themselves are putting out incredibly high levels of progesterone when they're pregnant. I mean, levels you can't even duplicate by giving them progesterone. You know, for example, a normal progesterone level in a woman, and I've never even seen this, by the way, but a normal level is around 26 milliosmoles. When she's pregnant, it goes up to 460 milliosmoles. Progesterone is wonderful for pregnant women. First of all, the number one reason why women have miscarriages is a low progesterone. And and women who actually use progesterone throughout their entire pregnancy, their babies are extremely intelligent and very happy babies. So it's wonderful for the fetus, and it's good for the woman. You know, you can't hurt a pregnant woman with progesterone. You can only help her.
So if somebody's actually trying to conceive, is it helpful for them to lower their adrenaline and use the progesterone?
Well, the number one reason why women can't get pregnant is the low progesterone.
Okay.
You know, it's a nice hormone. Mm-hmm. You know, but again, it's mostly thought of as a woman's hormone, but it's important for men also. You know, men stop making progesterone around the age of 50. And it's after the age of 50 that men start putting on weight around the middle because now they have no hormone to block insulin. And they start getting prostate cancer because they have nothing to protect them from estrogen, which is the cause of prostate cancer. So again, it's an important hormone for men just from the insulin and estrogen standpoint. But also, a lot of men have anger issues, believe it or not. Do you believe that? But anyway, so again, it's not only good for them; it's good for the spouse. But remember, I mentioned that you can get rid of road rage in 24 hours. That's all it takes. And you know, there's a lot of anger going out around nowadays. A lot, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of division in the country for sure.
Yeah, I wonder how that happened.
Well, and there's a lot of you know, just stress. You know, what we call stress is a response. Well, in order to have a healthy response to stress, we have to have a reserve built up in our brain. We have to have some resilience. So as the adrenaline just keeps building up in our bodies, I think it's making people less able to deal with everything that they see going on around them. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. You know, Dr. Amen is probably the most famous of all doctors when it comes to ADHD. But again, never mentions adrenaline. But anyway.
Well, he does. He does. He in his brain health coaching program, he does, and he talks about progesterone. Like progesterone is just.
And he got that. He got
be on the progesterone board. He says the most wonderful things about progesterone, and it really is true. It's what makes relationships with yourself and life and others, right?
Do you think maybe he read my book?
I think maybe he did. I think maybe he did because I had already read your book when I ended up in the Amen Clinic brain coaching program, and as he was discussing adrenaline and how it's affecting the brain function, and then he talked about progesterone, I was like, oh yeah, I already read Dr. Platt's book, and I had already experienced your progesterone cream, which yours is really unique. I mean, you can't just go to the store and buy this. This is something that we have to get from you, because tell us what's different about what your cream is versus something somebody might find at a GNC or wherever they might go, right?
Well, they probably have 100 progesterone creams on the market, believe it or not. You know, you're familiar with somebody called Dr. John Lee. He was a gynecologist, and he's the man that coined the term estrogen dominance. And he's written a number of books, or at least Virginia Hopkins wrote most of his books. But but he said that women produce about 20 milligrams a day of progesterone. And based on that, just about every progesterone cream there is either 2% or less. 2% would be 20 milligrams. And I even gave talks at the same conferences that John Lee spoke, and we sort of didn't get along too well because, you know, I was pushing high dose progesterone and he was talking about 20 milligrams. Anyway, he's passed on. But the point is that almost every progesterone cream on the market is either 2% or less. And the problem with that strength is that it can actually stimulate estrogen receptor sites instead of blocking them. And so it can make things worse. It is nowhere near the strength you need to block adrenaline. So I experimented when I was having the formula made up. We also tried a 10% strength, and we found no difference between a 5% and 10%. And the advantage of the lower strength, like 5%, is that using a higher dose, you can actually have more. So there's a certain problem that you can run into. So like I say, based on observation and whatever, and we try to eliminate anything that could give somebody have some kind of a reaction to.
Right. So is it normal, like my experience and my friend's experience, I've actually bought your progesterone cream and sent it out to people, not even really telling them what it's going to do. Just had them use it and get back with me. It's kind of a hobby of mine just to see if other people are having the same experience that I am. And I got an overwhelming, I know, right? Everyone is my guinea pig. So, but they're all volunteers and they like it and they think it's fun because it's what makes life neat, right? To see how we can help ourselves feel better. And I got a really overwhelming response from everyone about the progesterone cream, and they felt and noticed a difference in like 24 hours. Is that normal?
Well, or less. Yes, it's absolutely normal. People that have the most adrenaline are the ones who have the best reaction to it. Let me give you the one problem with progesterone cream. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Are you familiar with a condition called type 3 diabetes?
Yes.
Yes.
The other term, I'm sorry?
Alzheimer's.
Well, some people equate the term type 3 diabetes with Alzheimer's because it's probably the number one cause of Alzheimer's. What type 3 diabetes is, the other term for that is insulin resistance in the brain. What that means is that the insulin in the brain has a hard time getting glucose into the brain cells. And because of this, it can predispose to developing Alzheimer's. Now, there are certain people that when you give progesterone cream to, all of a sudden, I mean, within minutes, they'll have a reaction where they actually have an outpouring of adrenaline. They'll either get more tense or they have palpitations or whatever. And this is because one of the benefits of progesterone is that it can actually create some degree of insulin resistance. And why this is a benefit is that it prevents people from getting sleepy in the afternoon or sleepy when they're driving. This is good. But if people already have insulin resistance and then they take progesterone and get more insulin resistance, it can set up a reaction where the body has even a harder time getting glucose into the brain cells, and the body puts out even more adrenaline to try to compensate for this. So what's interesting, they don't have a test for type 3 diabetes. But this is actually a test for it. If you give somebody progesterone and they have that kind of reaction, then you look to see if they might have this. And why it's important to actually diagnose that is that Alzheimer's is a disease of prevention. You know, I know we live in a country where they don't allow preventive medicine, but if you know that you are predisposed to Alzheimer's and you start using a lot of MCT oil and coconut oil, you prevent it. They've even cured Alzheimer's with coconut oil. I don't know if you've heard that. Okay. So, but now the other thing is that if you have somebody who just doesn't eat vegetables and doesn't use coconut oil or MCT oil and uses progesterone, they can actually have the same reaction. You know, they'll do well to begin with, but because progesterone does a lot of nice benefits, but if after they use it maybe for a day or even less, and all of a sudden they get that kind of reaction, it's only because the brain doesn't have enough fuel, and that's treated again with vegetables and coconut oil and MCT oil, and then they can use the progesterone. Is that confusing?
So, and we actually have a really great diet plan that you're including with the progesterone cream so that people can understand that diet connection, right?
It's a meal plan to lower adrenaline levels.
Yeah, so what we've done is we've gone ahead and set up our own little website for the people that are watching this, and it's cortisolfix.com. And when you order the progesterone cream through cortisolfix.com, you will get his diet plan with that. And so for those that are watching this, please check out cortisolfix.com.
And so let's talk about this type 3 diabetes again, just to make sure that people are clear. So if they use the progesterone cream and they have a certain response, then that's something that they need to follow up on or look at?
Yeah, or they can even call me if there's a problem.
Okay.
And once they actually start to follow the diet, then they can start to take the progesterone cream and benefit?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have to do them together? Let's just say somebody out there, I don't know, no one would ever do this. Let's just say someone out there got their progesterone cream, rubbed it all over themselves, and then completely forgot to do the diet for a couple of days. That's not a problem.
It shouldn't be a problem.
Right. But if they do have this sort of stress response, the diet could be what they need to do, and they just need to call you if they have that type of response, and you're going to walk them through that.
Yes, I've dealt with talking about thousands of patients with progesterone, and this kind of reaction I've only seen maybe 5 or 10 times.
Okay.
So it's there, but it's not common, obviously.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has just been super educational.
Well,
It's great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for all your research. You guys, this is the book, Adrenaline Dominance. It is so good. Like, if you love research where the dots are connected and just having your mind blown, get this book. And it's not that big of a commitment, people. You can do it. Okay. One chapter at a time.
Well, they can usually read it in one day.
I read it at the beach and was just completely blown away by all the connections that you've made in your research. And what we need right now is like solutions. We need things that are like one move and it's the right move and we feel progress, right? Everybody wants a feeling. So this adrenaline dominance and lowering the adrenaline the progesterone cream is definitely something that's going to give you a feeling, I think.
Yeah, and certainly any woman that's on birth control pills should be on progesterone because they're no longer making progesterone.
That's a big part of the population.
It is a big part of the population.
Yeah, well, you know, they're going to gynecologists.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, thank you, Dr. Platt. We hope to do another follow-up interview with you later, and we hope that you guys will try this progesterone cream and get back with us. Let us know what it does, what it fixes, how you feel, because everyone that I have turned on to this has loved it.
So like the video, comment below, share the video. Let's get the message out there that there's better ways for people to feel really good.
You know, let me tell you, I appreciate what you're doing because there's a lot of people in this country that are, well, I hate to use the word abused, but they're not being treated as well as they should be.
I know.
I'm talking about the medical system. And,
yeah.
So, you know, having you get this message out there, it's important to me. You know.
Yeah. Well, and I work with a lot of groups of people that are like suicidal teenagers and things like that, and being able to and people that have PTSD. Those are my favorite groups to work with because when people have PTSD, what's that?
Do you work with autism people at all?
I have not, but I know people who do.
Well,
but showing people with PTSD that it's brain function, like it's not mental, it's a brain function issue, right? This is life changing for people to just see it that way and then see like a solution, right? Like your cream.
Exactly.
And please share. What do you have to share with people about the autism?
People with autism have incredibly high levels of adrenaline. And, you know, which is why some of them can actually memorize a phone book. I mean, remember adrenaline gives people intelligence. And they respond wonderfully to lowering adrenaline using progesterone cream.
Because autism is really high, fast brain function, right?
Yeah, they try to avoid any kind of stimulation because they're already overstimulated with adrenaline. So they avoid people, and some of them don't talk. But once you give them progesterone, they start talking. And anyway, and also they improve also with the meal plan. But they do really well.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who are using meal plans with their autistic children, but this progesterone cream could be that missing link for them where they really see.
Well, children with autism, they often take away dairy products and gluten and stuff, but they need to be on vegetables and coconut oil and MCT oil. Yeah.
Wow.
So, anyway.
This has just been super enlightening. Really has been. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Platt.
It's been a pleasure. It really has been. Okay.
So go to cortisolfix.com and get yourself some cream.
And then let us know what kind of results you're having, because we're going to share with each other, and we just need to help everybody be able to sleep and be calm and have a good relationship with yourself and with life. Because when you calm yourself down, your brain function opens to creative solutions and connecting with other people. Being in a high stress state is not good. So this is a really super, super easy way for you to help your body move in a more relaxed state. And that's what we're all about. That's where you heal. It's where you create. It's where life gets good. So definitely go to cortisolfix.com and get the cream and give it a try.
Do I have time? Do I have time to make one more thing?
Yeah, why not? Absolutely.
Well, have you ever heard of something called an overactive bladder?
Yeah.
They talk about it on television.
Mm-hmm.
Adrenaline gives women that urge to urinate, and these are the women that sometimes they're running to the bathroom, they get some leakage, and they call that urgency incontinence. And they're treating women now with Botox injections in the bladder now, which means that for the next 3 months, they have to self-catheterize themselves every time they have to urinate. But again, this is all caused by excess adrenaline. That urge to urinate, and you can get rid of it in 24 hours. So
I would much rather try the progesterone cream than use a catheter on myself.
exactly. I'm just saying that's why it's important to get messages out there. That's what I mean. People are being abused. Anyway, okay. I have nothing more to say.
And people don't really understand like how we're made and how the body works. So we're trying to just take it like one little piece at a time, educate people, and then give them a solution that's actually going to work so that they can feel progress and they can see a result and help move that body into a state of balance. If you help your body balance, it has a self-healing mechanism, right? And
the body has an amazing capacity for healing itself.
Yeah. And that way you're not at the mercy of medical doctors. And, even like with the whole events that have been going on, there were a lot of people that couldn't get in to see their physician. So, it's just really easy to understand how your body's made and then find really cool products like your progesterone cream and move into a solution based on what your body needs and how your body's made.